welcome to another edition of the Capital Conversation podcast. On this one, we're going to be talking about the Joe Biden campaign now that he's officially the Democratic nominee, and the recent sexual assault allegations that have surfaced from a few different women with varying credibility, and the one that came to the main focal point being Tara Reid, a former staffer from his Senate days.
Yeah, and in a time where the news cycle seems to be wholly encaptured with the coronavirus, it's fascinating that Joe has managed to find his way in there with anything, because politics has kind of been set aside for now. But he has an accuser, the most prominent, or several accusers, the most prominent of which is Tara Reid. She was a Senate aide for him, or a staffer, 30 years ago, and I'm not going to be too graphic, but she claims that he assaulted her or abused her or invaded her privacy, anything beyond what could be a misunderstanding, I think. Like in the past, Joe's done back rubs or sort of like creepy but not flagrantly.
Yeah, maybe crossing a line, invading somebody's personal space, but not something that you can say is undeniably wrong. But I mean, like you said, we're not going to get into the specifics for this podcast, but the things that she is alleging that Joe Biden did to her are certainly not something that could be misconstrued as being a misunderstanding or just somebody that's a little touchy-feely.
And this is big, and a lot of people are saying Trump has had several of these along the same lines and no one seems to care, and that's true. But Trump's calling card, or a big piece for him, is that he's not a politician. He's just a guy like anybody else who likes women, and people just say, oh yeah, that's Trump. He's just kind of a man's man with little regard for political tradition or anything. But Joe has been a champion of women's rights and violence against women protections and the Me Too movement for his entire political career. So it seems a bit more impactful to Joe than it would be to Trump, or even is for Trump, simply because he's, for his whole political career, been pushing forward for women and saying that women should be heard and listened to and maybe even believed when they make a claim, even if there's no corroborating evidence and it's just a he said, she said. So it's interesting to see him on the other side of this now and see how he reacts.
Yeah, and a lot of the punditry has been comparing this situation to the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation and controversy, I guess is the right word, and all that he went through with the allegation from Christine Blasey Ford. And at that point, Biden and several prominent Democrats and the media were highly publicizing of these allegations. They were saying that all women should be believed, and they wanted a very thorough process into Justice Kavanaugh.
They dragged him onto the Senate floor and humiliated him for a couple days in a row for hours on end, just to eventually confirm him to the Supreme Court anyways. And I think objectively, there's more evidence to corroborate Tara's claim than there was Dr. Ford's, just given that her mom called it, or a woman who now is believed to be Tara Reid's mother, called into the Larry King show and said that her daughter had been harassed by a well-known public figure, maybe she even said senator. She said senator. And the timing lines up, so we don't know for certain. It does raise some eyebrows. And Tara Reid says that there's documentation of this, perhaps in her personnel file at the University of Delaware. She went to one of Joe's top aides, I think maybe 3 aides, about this, and they took notes on it. And those notes that she saw them taking would be in her file. But unfortunately, that's closed for now until 2 years after Joe's political campaign.
Service,
so there's a lot of question marks, more so than there were with Kavanaugh and
a lot of pressure has been mounting on Joe Biden to release the files from the the University of Delaware, the ones that he donated after his Senate campaign had finished, and he agreed to ordered the release of all of his files from the National Archives that relate to his Senate career. But this is something that the media has struggled to pick up on. But from the beginning, Tara Reid has been very clear that her alleged assault. She did not file a formal complaint. She spoke to some aides about how to handle the situation. They took notes that would have been placed in her personnel file, along with things like sick days that she took or notes about her job performance, things like that. It went along those same lines into that folder, which she believes would have gone to the University of Delaware with all the other stuff that Joe Biden donated to that university, but not something that she filed formally and then would have been put in the National Archives records on Joe Biden's Senate career. And he claims that there's no records at all, no complaints against him in the National Archives. Nobody ever filed a formal complaint against him from his Senate career. And to all the knowledge that we have, that stands up. That's a true statement.
But as you said, even if this did happen, it wouldn't be in the National Archives anyways. So Joe trumpeting his vindication based off of that seems a bit misplaced and maybe even disingenuous. Although I don't put something past Joe like that. There's always a good chance he just doesn't know what's going on. So there's that. But
yeah, but I mean, a lot of pundits from the left and Democratic people that have stood behind Joe Biden have used that as an argument. Said people have searched the National Archives. He's ordered for them to be released. There's no records. There's no mention of her. He's vindicated, and I think that's a misunderstanding on the part of the media that from day one of this allegation, Tara Reid has said that she didn't at the time file a formal complaint. But to me personally, I'm having a real hard time. Obviously, Joe Biden is innocent until proven guilty. I don't think there's enough to convict him at a trial or something like that, which will never happen anyway. I would like to see some corroboration, but it does raise a lot of red flags, at least in my mind. I think it stands up and figures to be true when you evaluate all the facts of his accuser. I mean, she's a lifelong Democrat. She's long been a supporter of Senator Biden. She says that she still respects him greatly and was a proponent of his career and all the work that he's done in Washington.
Where it falls apart for me is that the public doesn't have access to these records at the University of Delaware, but Biden does, and Biden could release them should he want to. And he's had aides go through and look at the records in the past year. And I think that if there was nothing in Tara Reid's personnel file, he would release it and unequivocally vindicate himself. Like if he did that and there was nothing in there, at that point it's truly just a he said, she said for me. And I tend to think that he's innocent until proven guilty, which is the same way I felt on Kavanaugh. And I think that's how a lot of people who just stick to principle would view the situation. And since he can do that, and he has not, I'm led to believe that there's something in there, and maybe it's not a note that says Joe Biden.
It might not even be related to Tara Reid, but it seems like there's something in there that his aides found when they went through the file before he announced his campaign for presidency, that he's concerned about being public. And his comment kind of hinted at that when he said that he didn't want those files to be scrutinized and ravaged through and made public and all this in the midst of a presidential campaign. So I'm not saying that there's some big criminal conspiracy out there, but there's something that I think Biden thinks will potentially hurt his presidential campaign that is in those files that, he's wary of. And if there wasn't, he would have nothing to lose by releasing them and vindicating himself. But right now, I mean, I find it hard to believe that this woman would lie to her mother for 30 years about the allegation, assuming that that was her mother who called into the Larry King show. And when we go back to the National Archives, I mean, there isn't any record of any other incident with any other male senator around that time that it really lines up to have been someone else's mother.
I mean, it all lines up. And if you look at it, and we keep drawing these Kavanaugh comparisons, but if you just objectively look at the corroborating evidence for each Christine Blasey Ford and Tara Reid, there is undeniably more support that Tara Reid's allegation is, or might be true, than Christine Blasey Ford's. Now, I'm not saying it is true, but if you thought that Dr. Ford's allegation had any merit, then you cannot just shoo this away. Like, you just can't. And Nancy Pelosi, for example, went on MSNBC and said that she felt Joe Biden had, responsibly responded to the allegations and that she was satisfied with his response. She still supported the Me Too movement, but she thinks that, he's exonerated or something. And this was before Joe had even
by issuing a straight, denial. This is not.
Yeah, I didn't do it. Oh, okay. You're good.
And I made this point to you off camera about how in the aftermath of the Kavanaugh hearing was the most popular that the Republican Party has been in this age of politics in at least the last decade. They were immensely popular after that Kavanaugh hearing, and a lot of that was the American people, I think's frustration in the lack of due process on the part of the Democrats trying to convict somebody before they had all the facts, and the hypocrisy that they were showing. And now it's getting even worse because they're being very hypocritical in the sense that they don't want to put Joe Biden through the same ringer that they've now set a standard of.
Yeah, and they're going to make some constitutional arguments, like it's the Senate's role to hold a hearing and thoroughly vet justices on the Supreme Court, like that's something they had to do that was in like the Senate's thing. So by them doing that, they weren't being political in nature, but they were just doing their job and vetting a Supreme Court nominee, which, on the surface, like if you just objectively looked at that statement and say, yeah, okay, it's your job to do that, and it's not your job to, vet a presidential candidate. But when you add some like feel to it, when you add some personality to it, when you look at it beyond the surface, and you see and you gauge the senators' reactions, high-ranking Democrats' reactions to Kavanaugh and to Biden, it's just not remotely the same. And while you look at their official job positions and what they legally have to do to fulfill their duty as politicians, you can say, all right, I understand, but it just doesn't line up morally, I don't think. And I think that's where Biden and some of his defenders are really going to lose a lot of ground politically, because people want politicians who are strong and principled and moral, I think, and just going back and forth like this is not a good look, I don't think, in the long term.
Yeah, I think that it just kind of rubs people the wrong way. I mean, you want your politicians to have conviction, stand on principle, and we've already kind of seen a downturn in that, in this recent age of politics. The principle, the conviction has gone down. I mean, just throwing out a couple examples of that, when you look at, Mitch McConnell and his policy on Supreme Court justices, he's taking great enjoyment in playing politics in that game. He refused to give Merrick Garland even a Senate hearing when Obama nominated him in the last year of his term, saying that he was going to wait until the new president was elected. Trump was elected. He got Gorsuch through. But then a couple of years later, he turned around and he was doing a Q&A at a university for students, and the student asked him, in the last year of President Trump's term or a Republican president's term, if a Supreme Court seat were to open up, how would you handle that under a Republican administration? And McConnell said very calmly that they would fill the seat.
Yeah, he's not being shy about it at this point. I mean, it's pretty clear what he's doing, and he's embracing it. But
yeah, he enjoys being the villain, and I don't mean to pick on McConnell. There are plenty of politicians that lack principle, that lack conviction, and I think that it's something that frustrates the American people. We've definitely seen an increase in that. I mean, having a stance like that, to be frank, in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s of politics, he would have been vilified. I mean, there's no way that he would have won re-election, even in the most politically favorable state to the party that he represented.
Yeah.
But now, he's beloved by Republicans. Yeah. So.
Well, one thing that really rubs me the wrong way about Tara Reade's accusations and the response from politicians and in the media is that even if you thought Joe Biden was, even if you truly believed that this was completely false, that nothing happened, why wouldn't you want a thorough investigation? If not to just prove your own point, so you could go around and say, I knew it, I'm principled, I demanded an investigation here, I demanded an investigation here, And if you actually thought that he was innocent and he didn't do it, then this wouldn't, like, nothing would happen. Like, what's the downside if you actually think he didn't do it?
Well, it goes back to, like I said, about the University of Delaware records. You know, if Biden had nothing to lose by releasing those records,
He didn't do it.
he would do so, at least in my mind. I mean, unless it just makes too much sense to do,
Yeah.
you know, that's all I got.
And I think when it comes to this, people use politics just as a means to, or use the law and the institutions that are in place to just advance, like, to advance their own agendas. Like when Kavanaugh was being vetted, senators said, you know, we're not picking on him, it's just, we're not playing politics, it's our job to do this. And when people ask that the records from Delaware be released, they say, oh, well, it's just the policy that we can't do it for 2 years. And in both instances, like, they're using institutions that have traditionally been in place to advance their own political agenda, and then acting as if they're, like, you know, objective and a third party and there's nothing we can do, that's just how it is, and we're just going off, you know, how things have historically been done.
Right.
And that just feels shady to a lot of people. And I think they're going to ultimately pay for that. And
I think the Democrats need to do something because, I mean, just speaking for the two of us here, I mean, we were talking about this off camera, and, you know, we're both sitting here as people that certainly would have and will, I guess, consider voting for Joe Biden for president in 2020. But, you know, we both believe that there's a good deal of credibility to be had with this accusation. And, you know, right now we don't have enough information to, you know, exonerate Joe Biden or to say that definitively he did it. But, I mean, at least speaking for myself here, you know, if I had to vote today, I wouldn't vote for him because I don't feel comfortable that he didn't do this. And it sounds like you feel the same way. And I think that they have to consider that there are going to be people out there that have the mentality that we have.
yeah, and lots of them, I think.
They don't want to lose those votes. I mean, they made a mistake with Hillary Clinton that had a lot of people that would not vote for Trump that didn't come out and vote for Hillary Clinton. Now, not because of, you know, assault reasons, for other reasons for Hillary, but they don't want this to turn into Hillary's emails.
Yeah.
They don't want to turn this into a reason for people that wouldn't be inclined to vote for Trump, like neither one of us would be, that now will not go and vote for Biden and are just not going to vote at all, or will write in somebody or vote for a libertarian, you know.
Yeah, and the thing is,
that's what cost them an election.
I think a lot of people feel frustrated that there's 330 million people in America, and every single time we've had a recent election, it's always two seemingly bad choices up for election. Like Trump, well, that's not true. But I doubt there are lots of people out there currently who want to go out there and vote for Trump. I think it's probably less than a third of all Americans. And I think the same goes for Joe Biden, and I think the same went for Hillary Clinton back in 2016. So I think these nominations are frustrating people. And Joe, even beyond the sexual assault, I mean, there's serious questions about his mental health and mental stability. Like if you look at clips of him talking and communicating now and 30 years ago, I mean, he was a fluent, proficient, and coherent speaker. And now it seems like if he doesn't have a teleprompter in front of him, he loses, he doesn't know what to say.
coherent sentences.
And that, I mean, even before these allegations, people were uncomfortable voting for him simply because they didn't think he was mentally stable enough to make it in
Well, I
office
mean, that's
for
alarming
years.
because there's no teleprompter when you're sitting in a meeting with a foreign leader.
Yeah, I mean, he calls Iraq, he mixes up Iraq and Iran. Like, you can't do that if you're going to be the president. Like, you in his memory too, I mean, there are actual, like, mental health experts out there who have come out and said that they think Joe Biden is suffering from early onset, or not early onset, he's kind of old, but is suffering from the early stages of some sort of dementia. And if that's the case, a lot of people would feel extremely uncomfortable voting for him.
Yeah, and I've said several times how frustrating it is as a young person. You know, we both turned 18 in February, and you know, we're looking forward to our first presidential election, and to have the candidates look like this.
Yeah.
You know, in the first presidential election of our lives, and you know, our first really like experience into politics, is just kind of frustrating.
Yeah. And it's not a lack of qualified people, I don't think. I think there's lots of, young, enthusiastic, yet appropriately seasoned politicians on both sides of the aisle to mount far more compelling and successful presidential campaigns than either Trump or Biden.
Yeah, there's plenty of, politicians and people in general that I would love to see run for political office or run for president or be the nominee of a major party, but they're not the people that have been winning nominations, in as far back as I can remember.
Yeah. And I think, just the nomination of Biden really sums this up, because you have, the old age thing. People have, a big critique of modern politics is that all the politicians are, over 70 years old, and now you have two 70-year-olds running, or,
right. And
politics.
there were so many Democrats that I saw, make comments and say how frustrated they were that, they started this out with 25 candidates with, the pinnacles of their party, all out there, vying for the spot, whatever. And then what they ended up with on the stage as the, field tightened to 6 and 8 and 7 was a bunch of white, mostly elderly individuals and majority males.
Yeah. And people, just a natural thing is that people think politicians are corrupt or politicians are above the law. And now you have two guys running for president, and I think both people, maybe not now, but given a month, will probably think both of them are sexual scumbags. And I think that that's something that it just reinforces.
Yeah, really frustrating to a voter.
Yeah, like people want, it's not just about the policy, people want to vote for a person that they can get behind and is charismatic and they think is moral and principled, and even if you don't agree with them, you feel like they're doing what they feel is best for the country and for you. And when you see a politician like Joe Biden or Trump or McConnell, even as you said, just completely flip-flop back and forth just to maintain their political office, it's off-putting. So to see two guys like this run against each other is disheartening for a lot of Americans who are hoping for someone youthful or principled, or not have any accusations of sexual assault against them. It's not that hard to do.
It shouldn't be, but apparently it is. And then, I saw a quote that really frustrated me from Joe Biden the other day on Twitter, and it said, I don't have it directly, but that basically the point of his campaign, the point of his presidency, is to provide a transition or a passing of the torch to the Mayor Pete's of the world. Yeah. And see, that comment just is really upsetting, at least in my mind, because I think a lot of people think right now, well, why not just let Mayor Pete be the nominee now? Like, why do we need a transition?
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I think it goes for both parties, but I think it's a little more frustrating for Democrats, given that they sort of trumpet themselves as the party of inclusivity and diversity and youth, and millennials and young people and even Gen Xers are far more likely to vote for Democrats than Republicans.
Yeah, but I think you can give the Democrats credit for at least, the first election that I remember, being born in 2002 was 2008. And I remember them all, beyond that. So since 2008, I think that there's only been one inspiring candidate nominated by a major party, and that was Obama. So I think you have to give them credit because they accomplished that goal. The Republicans' major, presidential nominations have been McCain, Romney, and Trump. McCain, not a beloved figure in the Republican Party. Obviously, very well-respected war hero and all that, but, not really somebody that met the ideology of, what Republicans were in 2008. Not loved by a lot of people, not really a great politician, I wouldn't say. I think he was a little bit...
He was a little rough around the edges,
feeble, yeah. And then moving on to Romney, that's just a guy that I can't see anybody going to the polls excited to vote for. He just doesn't really fire people up at all. He's just a wealthy have, that a lot of people can't relate to. And then obviously there's a lot to critique about President Trump, so I think at least the Democrats deserve credit for finding a young guy, somebody that inspired confidence.
And Obama might even, Obama's election is still playing out today when you think about Biden. I mean, Biden's support is largely among. I mean, he's developed a decent coalition, so I don't mean to oversimplify it, but the African American vote is
carried him to the
yeah,
nomination.
It's huge for him.
And the reason that he has that coalition is because of his attachment to the Obama name.
Yeah.
He did not have that amount of support from the African American community prior to being Barack Obama's vice president.
So the Democratic Party is still definitely benefiting from Obama's election as president. And I mean, I guess I got to give credit to Obama because he really was like an inspiring candidate. I didn't agree with him, but it's easy to see how a party could really rally around him and support him. And he ran at an opportune time. I mean, there was a Republican president during, a pretty big recession, so there's that too. But he won convincingly, and he won with support and enthusiasm, and that's still rubbing off today because it got Joe Biden to the nomination. And I think it's also important to note that Obama didn't endorse Biden until he absolutely until there was literally no one left. Obama did not endorse Joe Biden.
Yeah, and I don't know what that says. I don't know if Obama didn't want to meddle or influence the primary, whether he did want Joe Biden to win that nomination. I mean, they're obviously great friends. I think they have a good deal of respect for each other. I think Obama's happy with the job that Biden did as his vice president. I don't know if he thought that Biden was necessarily the best candidate to beat President Trump. And I mean, Obama's a very smart guy, and chances are that he realized, as do most of us, that Biden probably was not the best candidate to face Trump. Mm-hmm. I don't think he felt comfortable endorsing somebody other than Biden. I think he would have felt like that was a betrayal.
Yeah.
So I think his position was to just not get involved, and obviously he would stand behind the Democratic nominee. But I don't know whether that can be taken directly as being like dissenting to the Biden campaign, like a black mark from Obama. But it certainly, doesn't inspire a lot of confidence for Obama's confidence in Biden's ability to do the job as president.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, it makes us ask these questions, which doesn't look good for Biden. Although I guess through Obama's inaction, Biden did maintain a large part of that black vote, minority vote, young vote.
I don't know that Obama's endorsement would have done much to the outcomes that Biden faced in the primary. I really don't. It seems like Biden got that Obama, strong supporter of Obama coalition of the Democratic Party, regardless of getting the Obama endorsement. But it's interesting, continuing to look at that 2020 election, how these allegations and such like that have kind of put a black mark or stain over his campaign and overshadowed all the questions about who his VP would be.
Yeah.
And I think that there's been a lot of hesitation from some of those top female candidates in the party to kind of speak out or call for more investigation into these allegations because they don't want to hurt Biden's feelings, and they want to still make sure that they're primed for potentially getting that VP spot on the ticket, which is obviously very coveted, but again, it's not a very principled stand. It's kind of self-serving as opposed to, looking out for the good of the country and, enforcing that policy of believing all women, taking all allegations seriously, giving them their due consideration.
Yeah, and one name that keeps popping up for Biden's vice president that, I don't really understand beyond just the demographics, maybe, is Stacey Abrams.
I think that would be like having Sarah Palin as your vice president.
Yeah, she lost a gubernatorial race by thousands of votes, and now everybody's pointing to her as some sort of great politician who needs to be put on a pedestal and given a platform. People talk about Stacey Abrams as if she's ever done anything that had any significance politically. As if she forced through good legislation or was a principled politician, or she never had a chance. She didn't really do anything. And I don't understand why she keeps popping up as a name for Joe, beyond the fact that she is a woman, which Biden said he wanted, and the fact that she is a minority. She's African American, and that obviously would appeal to a lot of the party. But it seems almost to me like the Biden campaign is just going past what we've traditionally looked for in vice presidents, and like what principles could augment our campaign or sort of excite this demographic because they differ from us in thinking about this. Like Pence was chosen because he appealed to evangelicals, not because he was a white guy. And I feel like the Biden campaign is more just saying, okay, we need to get a female and we need to get a black person, and if we do that, then these are the names that come up and we're just only going to look at them. And I think that's a pretty poor way of going about it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think the American people are going to see through that whole identity politics thing and say, does she really stand up on the merits? And that's why I'm saying, like, I see the same sort of thing as what happened with McCain by tapping Sarah Palin as his vice presidential running mate. You know, he wanted somebody that was energetic. He wanted somebody that was young, that could really provide a spark to a campaign that was failing. And the American people immediately took it at face value. I mean, again, she at least was governor of a state, but
Oh, I mean, it was Alaska. I could govern Alaska.
was not a super accomplished politician, not frankly a very intelligent woman.
And McCain even came out and publicly said, you know, she was a terrible choice. Like, I shouldn't have picked her.
And I think that same sort of thing will happen with Stacey Abrams. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see what happens. I think Biden's got some other viable options. I mean, there are some great women in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And, you know, I might even go as far to say that if Biden picked a vice presidential candidate that I personally felt compelled to vote for, that could keep him in check, because in my view, and maybe this is a little bit jaded, but I don't think Joe Biden is going to be coming up with the transformative ideas that
I don't think he's up to the task.
I think I'm voting for Joe Biden's vice president and his cabinet.
But you're going to want to hear more about these
Yeah.
allegations.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is assuming that those are taken care of. I mean, I'm still not, I would be up in the air at that point, but who he picks for vice president might actually sway me
Immensely
one way or
important.
another.
Absolutely.
More so than it would be for Trump or for Hillary or for anybody that I can really think of that's run for the presidency recently, just
Yep.
because I actually think he has dimension.
I agree.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. We'll see you next time on the Capital Conversation. Thanks for tuning in.